On the count of five, four, three, two, one. Hello and welcome to Success Series with Ravi, a podcast channel where we talk to accomplished individuals from all over the world. Today, I'm excited, thrilled to have with me Abhilash Krishna, founder CEO of Carestack, a Thiruvananthapuram and Florida-based cloud dental software company. Carestack has, over the years, raised over close to $60 million, and Abhi can clarify if I am erring on the wrong side of things. In a series of fundings now, and in this conversation, we'll learn about his super successful entrepreneurial journey in building Carestack. So, with that, let me invite Abhilash onto this conversation.
Hey, thanks, Ravi, for having me to your show. Thanks very much.
Hi, Abhilash. It's a privilege to have you here, and
Likewise.
as I just mentioned, your entire journey of building Carestack has nothing is nothing short of extraordinary, and it has some interesting nuggets. We have discussed this last year, and I thought let's create an episode on that because it's worth learning and getting inspiration from. So before we begin, let's set the context here. Why don't you talk about a bit about your formative years before your entrepreneurial gig? So what was your education like, and what did you do before you started Carestack?
So, I'm completely homegrown from the state of Kerala here in the southernmost part of Kerala. It's a city by the name of Trivandrum. This is where I was born. I had my education, schooling, education, all of that. I pretty much spent my teenage time in the state. Um, and I graduated as a mechanical engineer, and post graduation, I have 3 years of corporate experience working for corporations like Oracle, Citibank, and Microsoft. Um, and the whole pathway into software from being a mechanical engineer was just an accident. It was not that I was driven by a sense of purpose or any form of desire to be one. And because it was so, in 3 years, I recognized that I don't really fit inside a corporate environment. I was a total misfit. The work was uninspiring. The bosses were mediocre, and life was generally thoughtless. So, less than 3 years, I ended the trip. Um, Design was a thing of natural interest to me. I have always been a big fan of design, whether it's architecture, design of consumer items. Design was hugely interesting for me, and really, after a 3 year stint in the corporate, I took a year and a half break where I pretty much did not do anything, but I went on a path of learning, and primarily taught myself the foundations of user experience design and human-centered design, and created frameworks for design thinking and things like that. So that was kind of time well spent. So post the break, I started a consulting company which basically did user experience design and software prototyping as a service. I'm not sure if we can call that a consulting company. It was more of an outfit with myself and a team of two others. And the service that we provided was really design and software prototyping for organizations which wanted a preview of the requirements that they had put together prior to building software, right? So you have these tools like Figma, InDesign, the prototyping tools today. Back in 2003, back in 2005 to 2010, a tool called as iRise was hugely used by enterprises, which was a real powerful tool, which had all the components for quickly creating high fidelity, high interactivity prototypes that could really be extended to a set of stakeholders for gathering feedback, right? So what I did is I took all the learnings of design that I had developed and trained myself on the tool, and then we launched the consulting company, and we were just providing user experience design and prototyping services to corporations. And much of my work was in healthcare, across both the provider space and in the payer space. And it was one such prototyping assignment for a dental group practice in Orlando, Florida, that led to the formation of Carestack in 2015. So that's kind of life before Carestack, what it boils down to.
So the consulting company that you began was within 3 years of your corporate experience. Is that fair to say?
No, no. Post my corporate experience, a year and a half, I took a break. I did not work anywhere. Then for 3.5 years, I ran a consulting company, which just does design and prototyping. And bulk of the work was in the healthcare spectrum, largely working for corporations in the insurance space and in the care management space. And one of the corporations happened to be a dental group practice in Central Florida, which was providing dental coverage to Walt Disney employees. And I spent 2 years as part of an assignment with them, and then figured out that there was a real possibility in dental that we could tap into and really create a difference to the industry.
Got it. And was this in Florida already, or were you running this consultancy from here in India?
No, so the way it happened is in 2009, I decided to leave United States and come back to India.
Mm-hmm.
So I left working in corporate somewhere towards mid of 2008, and by 2010, I relocated fully back to India and started building the consulting company from India.
Mm-hmm.
Doing services for customers in US, and I used to travel back and forth once or twice a year to meet some of the key customers, and that's kind of how it worked. In 2013, I basically went and stayed for an extended period of time, over 6 months or so, in US in multiple parts, for the purpose of supporting the organization with my services. And that whole year 2013 and 14 was largely spent inside a dental office, right?
Right.
So I was really part of a dental operation as I was learning the workflows and helping the team put together the systems for bringing dental and medical together. That was the scope of the project that I was enrolled for. To go into a dental office and then figure out how you could incorporate chronic disease management systems inside a dental setting.
Mm-hmm.
So it required me to understand the dental workflows and then think about integrating medical into dental. Right. So 2 years, 2013 and 14, was spent understanding dental, and I kind of came to this conclusion that before you can incorporate medical into dental, you had to fix dental first. Mm-hmm. That's how it happened.
But what is more intriguing is you do not have a formal design degree as such, right? You are a mechanical engineer, right?
Yeah. No, I don't have a formal.
So how did you build the credibility in the market to go and get design assignments to start consulting? Did you have a team who were from design-led backgrounds, or because this is the most important part for me to understand? First of all, you having the confidence that you can solve design problems, and then the clients having the confidence that you could offer this. So how do you explain that? How did it happen?
Yeah, so 2000 when I started basically transitioning off from my corporate career into a freelance designer, what two things I did is, I had a natural flair for design. So I could so I am born and brought up in the state of Kerala, and this state has a deep degree of affinity towards brotherhood as a concept that we all embrace, right? So our empathy quotient for one another is high. So naturally, coming from that state, I was able to empathize with people in general, right? So that the foundation for producing or solving problems through design happens to be empathy, which was what the state gifted me with. So that existed. The second bit is, how do you take those skills and put in some bit of hustle and turn it around into a revenue stream, right? Mm. That's kind of where so few things that I did is, the tool of choice or the technology of choice through which I went in to provide my services what was not scrappy. I specialized on a tool which was only used by enterprises and which did not have a large number of users. So back in 2010, there was this enterprise product called as iRise, which is a rapid software prototyping platform. It gives you, it's basically all these new generation prototyping tools on steroids. It's a very powerful tool which allows you to create a high fidelity, high interactivity prototype, which can actually mimic the look, feel, and behavior of the final application, right? And it was a very pricey tool, and therefore a lot of small and medium businesses couldn't really afford it. It was largely used by mid-sized organizations and very large enterprises. So I trained myself on the tool, and all the design exercises that I did and the solutions that I came up with, those were prototypes built around using iRise, and it was published on a definition center provided by iRise, where customers could basically give feedback and things of that nature, right? So because of the specialization on iRise, and because I focused on a niche way of delivering the user experience design services, customers who brought the licenses of iRise found me as a source for assisting them with user experience design projects. And that kept a steady stream of work coming in. The consulting company we built, we did $1 million of business from year one.
Wow.
With a team of 4 people, right? And that's because we focused on niche. We used so we never provided services outside of iRise to anybody. So it was only it was completely built around iRise, and we struck great partnerships with the executive team at iRise. They were hugely helpful to us as a young company in sending projects our way.
Right.
Getting us involved in some of the high visibility ones that iRise was working on,
Right.
helped us establish system integrator partnerships, which opened up more channels.
Right.
So that's how it happened. It
Right.
was using niche as a way to open the doors, and then naturally, we were
Deliver
good at
value.
yeah.
You are good at your work. I'm still I've still not moved to Carestack, but the thing I want to understand from you is, were you entrepreneurial as like since the beginning? Like you said, you were not happy with the corporate setup, and starting your own consultancy. As young as 3 to 4 years of experience in the industry. So were you different in a way where you could not see yourself cast into a mold in a corporate setup? Was that the reason why you branched out and started off your own? Would that be fair to say?
Actually not. So I come from a family which has been doing business, right?
I see.
So my father, my grandfather, all of them have been doing local businesses in the state of Kerala. So as a kid, I've seen I've been born and brought up in an environment and a household which is basically in tune with running a business or trading in general, right? So I've seen that since as a child. As I grew up and I started, working, work was hugely uninteresting, and I wouldn't say that because, it was. So the faceless existence. So let me put it this way: the best way to describe is I was feeling very self-important, right? So the decision to quit a full-time job was was really this overwhelming feeling that I was not recognized in a very large organization, right? And the it was an overwhelming feeling of self-importance, which I am unable to rationally describe to you. Because I have not done work that I should be recognized for. But in those 3 years, I couldn't just stand, being part of a very large organization where my whole existence was faceless, right? So it was like an existential crisis. So I started my entrepreneurial journey at the height of self-importance. Let's put it that way, right?
Got it.
Uh,
But were you a leader already, like in school and college days? Because somebody has to have these leadership abilities, not to be a part of a faceless crowd. So, were you always how was your college days, school days? Were you always leading initiatives and so yeah? So was that kind of a personality that you had?
yeah, no. Back in college and school, most kids who get raised in Kerala, they come with a very strong um view of life, right? So it's a very it's a thing which is inherent to our education system here in Kerala, right? The society is largely left leaning, right? And um, you're constantly you see your peers and people around you being very well aware about their rights. And as a society, Kerala promotes people to basically uh, go against the tide, right?
Got
You can see that in all quarters of the way the state has basically. It's not like the rest of India. It's a very very
Yeah.
um, different state in that aspect, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I grew up in my teen and in my college time as a left-leaning student leader.
Right.
Uh, Basically, complete and looking back right now, right? It's such a paradox, right? So from being a left-leaning student leader to really running a capitalist uh, organization, and it's a very dichotomous position, right?
Right.
Deep within, I still find and identify myself uh, back to my roots there, where
Right.
I can relate to people in a far deeper manner, and be empathetic to a cause, and really believe in the power of brotherhood as a fundamental value for living my life.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted that answer. So you gave that answer. So you're already a student leader, so to say, because it's not everybody just can swim against the tide. So I just wanted to understand what were your bearings. So you said Kerala as a state has uh, has had a big influence in your life. Excellent. So
Absolutely.
uh,
A huge part of what we do in dental is a cottage industry, right? You're not dealing with big, large enterprise customers. You're dealing with, mom and pop shops and private
mm,
practitioners who are. Uh, it's a small business world, right?
right,
And therefore, the small town upbringing that I have had, and the kind of environment that I had in Kerala, growing up and believing in the values of brotherhood, and you know those values and those upbringing hugely help to connect with small and medium business owners, and connect beyond boundaries, and connect beyond cultural constraints, and so that natural ability to identify and empathize, and really make a connection which goes beyond borders. That's
right.
what the state gave me.
Got it. Excellent. And what was also fascinating is your consulting revenues were already touching $1 million, is what you said, right?
Yeah, and we ran that consulting business over $1 million year on year for 4 years, and we
Wow.
actually shut it down, a cash cow. We didn't even try to sell it. We just shut it down because there was a larger fish to fry, right? Um, so we ran the company from 2010 to 2014. In 2014, I had made up my mind that the business was very non-scalable, right? It was a service business. The model was linear, and running the business was, you couldn't grow it beyond a certain extent, and you couldn't really create an impact. And just about when I was going through that period of retrospection, the opportunity in dental basically uncovered itself as a result of the work that I was doing, and then we decided that, okay, let's give away the service business and go after something uh, where we think there is like a humongous ability to create an impact,
Got
right?
it.
And where we can really build something huge.
And where did you see that? Was it in the US market to begin with, or did you have India, so to say, or other markets?
No, we only serve the U.S. markets. We built Carestack for U.S.
Hmm.
And it's a very, very interesting story. Right, 2013 and 14, I was inside the dental group, and you're just watching what's happening inside these dental groups, right? So it's a small and medium business organization, right? The tech, if you feel medical is old compared to other industries in
Yep,
terms of technology adoption, dental is probably a decade behind medical,
I see.
right? 90% of the industry is really filled with antiquated tools and systems for managing the office.
Hmm.
And a typical dental office works with 5 or 6 different software solutions to just manage daily operations. And most of these solutions do not play nice with each other, right?
Right.
The quality of labor that's available in the industry is not like you would find in an enterprise world, right? It's a
Hmm.
small and medium business. Human capital is in shortage. People are sourced locally and regionally, and therefore uh, you rely on a lot of human to human interaction and human labor, which doesn't have the sophistication or the professional education to manage operations tight, right?
Right.
A combined effect of both these things: lack of systemic, uh, lack of good, solid, modern, human-centered systems, and
Right.
lack of professionally qualified human capital. Uh, these things could only be solved by applying technology as an alternative, right?
Right.
And the existing companies in dental were not really doing it, right? So
Right.
it basically came down to two things: the decision to really start Carestack, right? One is, in 2015, in the summer of 2015, the practice owner at Celebration, it's the dental group that I was part of. It's called a Celebration Dental Group. And the practice owner, his name is Mark Husak, who became the first investor in Carestack. And Mark was basically talking about how bad the whole tech infrastructure is, and he had his iPhone and he kind of pulled it out and he talked about how he could really make calls and send text messages and take pictures and access documents and emails, everything on a single solution. And his whole point was, why wasn't um, dental having such a software where an
Mhm.
office could really do everything on a single solution, right?
Right.
So
So
I
software for managing the entire business, or are you talking about technical dental practice, or is this or managing the entire business of dental?
the entire business of dental, right? Of the
Right.
of a dental practice. So if you look at a practice, there are systems for managing the practice. Then there are systems for managing the clinical aspects, systems for
Right.
managing the revenue cycle management, systems
Right.
for phones,
Right.
systems for running analytics, systems for engaging with patients. Before CareStack, these were all systems which were owned and operated by multiple companies
Right.
and then bolted on top of traditional client server desktop based software,
Right.
right? So Mark's point was, we should really have one software which does everything, right?
Right.
And I kind of subscribed to the idea, so what I did is I took Mark's idea and then started talking to a handful of people in dental who are thought leaders and key opinion leaders that I had met at a few conferences and through some personal introductions that people made. And so building a modern age practice management software company in dental is very tough, right? Because it's because of change management.
Right.
Um, you know, the industry is owned, operated, and led by very large monopolistic distribution companies, which are 100 years old in the business, right?
Right.
Publicly listed, big, massive companies. It's a very tough space, and going against these companies, when you choose to build a practice management software product, you're doing two things. One is you're trying to go against these large companies. The second
Right.
thing is you're trying to create an all-in-one solution
Right.
such that you're also going against all those companies which are bolted on top of these client server systems.
Right.
Pretty much you're trying to start a business with no friends in the ground.
Right.
Right? You're going against everybody in terms of saying we're going to reimagine the experience bottom up,
Right.
and then we're going to go ahead and build a modern age technology company for dental, which kind of gives the power of more and just unburdens a practice from everything which is administrative in nature and allows them to truly focus on things that matter, like patient care and growth of the practice, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, and one of the KOLs even called us as delusional fools, right? So because it's a very tough business to a with a big barrier to entry, but then really going against this big massive uh, companies was also going to be very tough because you wouldn't get the necessary distribution, right? Um, so that didn't go well with us as a team. So we decided that we are going to basically not subscribe to the status quo and go ahead and build something ground up and really compete with the larger players and remove the fragmentation of technology systems from the market. That's kind of like the day we made the decision to really put all our go all in on building Carestack.
But what was that one thing that that gave you the confidence that this should work? Because all the data points said that there is a high barrier to entry, there is going to be slow adoption. Then there are these big players who are already capitalized the distribution, as you said. What were so while there were these challenges, what was one or two things that kept you going, that you know what, we still can have a go and succeed?
Yeah, I would bring that down to empathy, right? So for the time, for 2 years I spent inside the office, I kind of understood uh, how dental offices work and how dental teams work, right?
Right.
So let's look at the psyche of a dental owner, right? A dentist is not a trained business operator. He's a clinician who and they don't teach you business management in a dental school,
Right.
right? But once he graduates from a dental school and comes into private practice, pretty much he does a lot of things, right? That he's not really taught about, or nor is he getting paid extra for, right? He has
Right.
to hire staff members, he has to run payroll, he has to find patients, he has to chase collections from insurance companies. So a dentist, by the merit of going into opening a private practice, is doing more than what he gets paid for. So that's the first understanding of a dentist, right? You have someone who is doing more than what he gets paid for, and therefore such a person resonates well with those kinds of service providers who are willing to do more for him than what he is willing to pay them for, right? um, so none of the distribution companies, the existing companies, were really looking at helping the dentist and trying to do more for the dentist.
Got it.
uh, and that whole mentality was absent, right?
Right.
Because the dentist community is largely fragmented. The big guys were trying to nickel and dime every single bit of solution and just trying to take more dollars out of the pocket. So that was one of the key drivers that I thought would basically make them receptive, right? The second thing that was very crystal clear for us is, if you look at the priority, right, the dollars is basically one thing. It served for a business case. But a practitioner, when he goes into private practice and he's doing all these things to keep his practice alive, at the end of the day, he has very little time for himself and his family. And they go through tremendous amount of stress trying to run a practice, right? They're running a practice, working 5 to 6 days a week, right? And taking care of staff issues, finding patients. And they're not trained people, business people, to put up with all this stress, right? Um, so in my mind, the if we were to serve a value proposition where we can possibly put more time into the hands of the dentist, right?
Right.
Give them more peace of mind
Right.
and give them back more money. right? Such an offering basically gets reception, right? Now,
Right.
getting this understanding tight happened during the course of 2 years that I spent inside the practice and through numerous conversations, uh, both formal and informal, that I've had with hundreds of people that I've met from the dental industry during those times, right? Um, so that empathy of really figuring out that a company which can do more for dentists really has a chance at introducing an offering, that was the foundational part of the thesis.
Right. But when you began, did you have a plan to first get a foot into the door, solving a single piece of this end-to-end practice management, or did you go all in saying that let me solve everything? Because
It
I would
was all,
imagine it's difficult, no, to
it
solve
was
everything.
all in from day one,
Is it
right?
okay?
Yeah, because in these kinds of businesses where you have change management high, you cannot really make an incremental difference, right? You
I
have to
see.
basically be transformative from day one. Your sense of direction has to be along the lines of transformative or disruptive from day one. You can't really become iteratively better and stay in the game. It just doesn't work like that, right? Because you're fighting inertia. So 2015, the goal was to basically go all in one, right? Um, and start the whole experience around a great practice management product, and then build all the uh, pieces around it that eliminates an office to really work with 6 different software subscription companies.
But tell
So
me one thing. You are up against, so you're going to a customer and asking him to strip away all his existing investments, existing stack of, say, 5 vendors, and you're asking them to remove everything and take a bet on you. This is something, as a founder or somebody who is visualizing how he wants to solve this. This would also be something that would not give you a lot of confidence, no? Because that would stop you from taking that plunge. Because what you are asking a small time vendor, a small time practitioner is, hey, you know what? You have 5 systems, and you need to strip them away and go for my solution.
yeah,
How did you solve that?
staying foolish helps, right? I've not built a technology company before, right?
Before,
I have
exactly, yeah.
I've not really gone ahead and built a SaaS company before, right?
Right.
All I knew was how well I knew my end customer,
Mm.
right? And hundreds of conversations that I have had. And having worked in an office in frontline roles for 2 years, having seen the hidden cost of managing multiple systems, I've seen and experienced those in first time, right?
Right.
So I was not really writing a thesis in a glass cabin. I was in the trenches, and rubbing my shoulder with my buyer, and so the degree of empathy that I had developed for the buyer was so strong that nothing else mattered, right? So Carestack was built with the vision of going. That's why it's called Carestack. It's a
Yes, stack.
stack,
Yes. Yeah,
uh,
I can imagine. Yes.
right? So we went all in, right? Uh, and that was a big part of how we quickly gained the reputation of delusional fools in 2016 and 17, right? Because you know people would try to build bolt-on solutions and hook it into a client-server practice management system and try to ride the wave as part of a distribution company and try to gain business, right?
Yes.
My fundamental thesis has been is, right, even if it takes more time, even if it's a harder problem to solve, and you spend 15 years of your life doing it, taking away this business away from you is going to be equally, if not more, tougher, right? And therefore, it
Right.
makes all the sense to go in and do it.
Right.
Carestack was built and optimized with a long-term view of life, knowing that it
Right.
would be a very, very tough journey, and we have signed up for it, right?
Right.
And then that belief basically comes from how well we know the customer, and,
Right.
and fortunately not being a tech entrepreneur before, right?
Right.
So
So you mentioned how well we. So how did you build the we? How did you build your first team? and convince. It's not just convincing yourself, but you have to also get a team that who is equally convinced, because at least in the hindsight it all worked out fine. But if I were at your place, I would have been it would be a really difficult job for you to convince me, because everything is stacked against you, isn't it? So
Yeah.
how did you find your first team?
Look, I think again it goes back to naivety and ignorance, right? The entire team of Carestack minus Mark, our first customer, we don't have a background in dental, right? And I was the only person who basically has been inside a practice, right? Uh, so people were all taking my word for it, right? That we will be able to. It's largely the trust that people place in you during your early days, right? People see through the intent, and I think if your intent is more or less along the right lines, you will get your first set of believers, right? So the core team of Carestack was also built on the strongest feelings of brotherhood, right? So the first few people, um, they're pretty much family, right? We've known them for several years, um, and and the degree of trust that was required, that for them to make a decision, that existed, right? Um, and the lack of dental background and experience has been our biggest advantage, right? Because we could fight less of skepticisms that usually happens when you become wise, and you could really get started on the folly of youth as
Right.
opposed to get stranded on an island on the wisdom of age, right? So
Yes, and
um,
experience. Yeah.
that helped, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But who? How did you pick this team? Were they the same team? Were part of consultancy or?
No, actually not. So the team was all one of the person was part of the consulting assignment. My co-founder Kevin.
Right.
Uh, both of us were doing consulting together. But other than that, the entire team was assembled, and it
Okay.
was basically friends that I knew, and then explaining the opportunity to them, and the validation for all of them came. So Carestack is a unique story because when we decided to build technology and we said we're going to do Carestack, we had Mark, uh, you know, come into the ring with $1 million on investment, right? And ready to open up his practice where we could build technology, right? And along with Mark, in under 60 days, we raised another $4 million. And so our seed round was for $5 million. We had a customer in place who was willing to basically bet on the opportunity and open up his practice, and a whole bunch of young, hungry, stupid people ready to grab it. That's the
So
premise on which we started Carestack.
so for Mark to entrust such a big confidence in you, the pain point for Mark must have been really high, isn't it?
That's correct, because he has been running the practice for 25 years. None of the existing vendors had really come up with a solution. The trouble of managing operations using multiple systems has a huge hidden cost because systems don't work well. You've been losing patients, you have been missing collections, you have been missing appointments, you name it, right? You go, and every time you have to teach your staff how to use 5 different systems. So all these things are basically residual in Mark, and uh, and Mark was bold enough he was just insane like the rest of us, to the extent that he said, okay, I can kickstart this with $1 million. Uh, and that's kind of how we started. The other factor with Mark was that he knows me. By then, he knew me for 2 years because I'd worked inside the practice, 2013 and 14. So familiarity did exist, and then I built trust with him in terms of work ethic and things like that, right? So it was a
Yeah.
combination. It's personal experience and the trust that we shared as part of working inside the practice. That's how we got started.
But work ethic is and familiarity is fine, but you did not have product building experience, no, running a software development company. I mean, if he had $1 million, he could have gone to somebody more established, an established software company, and then ask them to solve for this. What worked for you other than familiarity and work ethic? How did he entrust the a software company sort of a confidence?
I think there is few things here, right? One is um, your understanding of user experience and workflows, and uh, your ability to translate that understanding into workflows that can really be transformative.
Got
That
it.
matters more, way more, than your technical proficiency in just writing code, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
and in vertical industries, if you look at the way software has been developed in vertical industries, it has always come from within the industry. There would be somebody who is part of the early dental softwares were all developed by dentists who are inside the
Got it.
practice, and then
Yeah.
trying to find to cobble up a team and then go about and build systems, right?
Right.
So what Mark prioritized was the vertical knowledge that I had over those 2 years,
Right.
and then the um, alignment of vision that we had, that we're going to go
Right.
all in. We are basically
Right.
going to build an all-in-one system, right? And we're going to really build a system which is transformational in nature. We think of this company as a 15, 20-year-old company which can really um, be the future of dentistry.
Right.
uh, and so there was so much of alignment in the way we thought about the business, right?
Got it.
The only question that was unanswered for Mark was that, okay, was $1 million enough to really, when you go on to build something like this, right?
Right.
And I said, no, we will have to basically have a seed of at least five. um, so if Mark basically led the round with $1 million, could we raise like another $4 million and really close the round? So we had the lead investor in Mark, and in 60 days, the rest of the money came, right? So it was basically being there with the right person at the right time and the right place, and it was like the universe conspiring and all these pieces coming and fitting together, right? When things happen so fast, in 60 days, somebody is putting $1 million on the table, you close the round, you take the money, you start writing
Right.
the application. There isn't a lot of time to think, philosophize, or go into retrospective mode. It's you're on the forefront working, right? You're actually doing it. It's almost like execution, like you're thinking.
Right. So my question is, 5 million is again a lot of money to put together without an MVP. Usually, what happens is whenever you're building an enterprise product, you come up with at least a prototype version where you actually demonstrate some value. So did you have that already? That actually showed some progress before you gathered 5 million, or like because otherwise it looks like the old software model where people invested a lot of upfront money to build software at the risk of, and there were risks, right? And then I come from a lean model. So how did so could you explain that? Did you have something running already with the first $1 million?
Yeah. So I had a prototype of which was built on iRise, right? So
I
because
see.
I come from prototyping background,
Right.
but we had the sense of direction. Right? I was clearly able to articulate a few things, right? One is the long-term vision around the fact that we are going to be an all-in-one company,
Right.
right? And we are not just going to be a software SaaS company in the sector. We are going to be a healthcare delivery play.
Mm.
Okay. The original purpose for which I went to Celebration back in 2013 was to
Right.
bring medical and dental together, which is
Got it.
still not solved.
Right.
Okay. So the whole purpose of really creating Carestack was to set dental straight first, so that you can evolve new models of care by bringing in medical into dental, and you can be that system of record where all this action happens, right? So when we did the pitch, we had a sense of direction on what Carestack stands for. It was never positioned as a software as a subscription company. It was a
Mm.
healthcare, it was a technology-driven healthcare delivery play, right?
Right.
So that's point number one. The second bit is, you know, uh, the entire workflows that you need to basically put in place to create a transformative experience compared to what existed. uh, it's a highly integrated set of workflows, which means your scheduling, clinical, revenue cycle management, analytics, and patient engagement features are built in a way that promotes user experience and allows the end user to save time and do more tasks with less number of clicks and with less number of people, right? Uh, these experiences were prototyped just to show the transformative nature of how you would really bring it together, right? Um, so these two things existed, right? The sense of direction and a good solid thought process around what creates a transformative difference from a software standpoint, right? What did not exist was obviously it was just 2-3 people with no background in building a technology company before. So whether we can actualize it into software, uh, that was the unproven thing, right? Um, and you know, and in my mind, I'm a big believer of building startups in a indeterminate fashion, to not really go after startups on a milestone driven thinking, right?
Okay.
I truly believe that startups have to be built in an indeterminate fashion. It's not, uh, and 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 the way I say that, it's not a finite journey, right? A startup is a binary, no matter how you cut it. It's a 0 or 1, right? And you don't get to know that uh, till it becomes a 0 or 1. That's kind of how unpredictable this whole thing is, right? So uh, and Mark kind of had the same alignment that, okay, uh, I think his life conditions and choices that he has made in life, he recognized that if you could trust the team, if you could sense the logic in the argument, then it's worth a shot. And if you have the money to basically put $1 million at risk on a game which is really 0 or 1, right? Um, and then it's worthy of giving it a shot. But it was not just Mark. I recognized that there was like another dozen people who thought the same way when the first round closed, right? And none of these people basically, uh, um, okay, all of them have basically most of them have come from the tech industry, right? So the early seed investors of Carestack has people who basically built uh, multiple billion-dollar companies, right? Who have taken companies public. So it's not like we took capital from angel investors who without a non-tech background. The majority of the angel investors, who all wrote like close to $500,000 checks, 400 to 500K checks, they all came from a tech background, most of them at least.
Got it.
So I was also looking at this as a collective, right? That you basically tap into the wisdom of the crowd, and you're open to suggestions, and you've uncovered an opportunity where you have a vested customer, and you have a path to entry, and you have a vision to execute, and a whole lot of stuff that you don't have, which probably the argument is capital can solve for it. So and everybody took a bet on that statement.
So with Mark, I agree that you had a relationship with him, and then there was trust, familiarity. How about what was the selling point for the other investors? Was it your early prototype and what you have already delivered? Was that the selling factor, or?
No, I think there was more context than that. I had big people who had started companies in vertical markets who have gone through similar journeys before. So one of the investors, his name is Babu, he started InvestNet, which is a wealth management platform, right? Where he built the entire set of solutions that was needed for complete wealth management and portfolio management. It took him 15 years to build InvestNet into a big company, right? It took him 3-4 years to get the product right. So he had it's a very, and the market size of wealth managers and dentists are more or less similar, right? Roughly 150,000 dentists and wealth managers each, right? And so that context existed, right? One of the other investors was a gentleman by the name of Kamath, who built an educational technology company providing a SaaS platform for schools, a learning management system for schools, and again, a deeply fragmented market. He took around 10 years to get down to 5,000 schools as customers. It took him 5 years to get the technology components right? So, the choice of investors were mostly people who understood vertical markets, software plane vertical markets, uh, the in a fragmented market, what's the operational model and the foundational value system that you require to compete. And once you get going, how big this opportunity could get into. People who have tasted that success, and people who basically always look for, like, are you getting started on the right foot, co-creating your solution along with the customer? Do you have early signs of buy-in from someone? And we, ticked all those check boxes, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we basically built the case. And then and in 60 days we had people that we had never met basically writing checks on the phone.
Got it.
It's a very unusual story. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk about the other part of the equation. The more important is the customers, right? So
Yeah.
so Mark, I understand he was invested already, but definitely you are not solving just for Mark's practice. You are solving for the industry. How did you convince your first early adopters, other customers other than Mark?
Yeah. We learned everything the hard way, Ravi. We did not get Carestack right in the first attempt. It took us 3 attempts to get the product right? So the first launch in 2017 failed. The second launch towards end of 2017, that failed. We finally got a product right early 2018, mid 2018, I would say, right? That you could really call as a minimum viable, a commercially viable product with the right kind of fit, right? It took us over 100 customers that we worked and implemented to get the product right. Okay, it took us.
Okay. So 100 customers were willing to experiment and offer you feedback.
No, that's not how it played out. I had gone ahead and sold for almost 300 customers even before a product was there, right? So and I did door-to-door selling, right? So I had sold 300 customers before I got the product correct.
What do you mean by selling? You had leads, not exact selling, no? Did they offer you money?
Yeah. So both. I basically got them contracted on a contract, and
Okay.
some of them also paid in advance,
Wow.
right? So, but 300 customers were basically booked in before the launch, right? And we launched the product prematurely.
I see.
Okay. And in that process, what happened is the first customers that we basically went into and launched Carestack, it created disruption to the practice. They lost money. They operations took a beating.
Exactly.
Right?
This is what I wanted to understand, because they're stripping away their existing
Yeah.
infrastructure and
No, man, this is basically it's like performing an open heart surgery, right?
exactly. Yeah. How do you transition to this? Yeah.
Yeah. So the first customers in the launch that we did in 2017, we literally brought a couple of practices to their knees, right? And there was bad press in 2017, right?
Bad press.
And then what happened?
Did you say press?
Yeah. In 2000, press.
Against you,
Yeah, people
against Carestack.
against Carestack. It's a very small market, so when things don't go well in one practice, it's very quickly reflected in online forums and communities where people are, where people get to know that it's not working like they thought it would. And guess what? I lost 200 of the 300 people that were sold. Okay,
Wow.
we refunded the money, and those customers we churned probably around 30% of the customers that we onboarded in 2017, right?
Wow.
So, and you had 70% of the customers who gave us the benefit of doubt and who gave us a second chance, right? And so we basically executed on that mandate, that vote of confidence that customers gave us as a second chance, and finally got a whole bunch of things working, and got a commercially viable product in 2018. Um, so it almost has taken us 3.5 years to get a commercially viable product out to the extent where we can start competing. That it didn't happen until mid to 2018,
Right.
right? Um, and every customer where we actually created a disruption, in vast majority of those customers, we repaid them the money. In other cases, I went ahead and personally apologized and covered up for their losses, right? And we have had no qualms in accepting that we made mistakes, right? Um, and then people, like I said, right, intent is probably everything,
Mm.
right? If you're not deliberate on screwing customers, people give you a second chance, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, so I think in a lot of cases, people could see through the intent.
Mm.
And in those cases where they couldn't see through in the first place, over time, they basically, and we have had customers who left us in 2017 and came back in 2020,
Ah, nice. Very
right?
nice.
So that's how it happened. Our it was not a smooth launch where we perfected everything in a few practices, convinced more people, and then rapidly scaled. We were an exact opposite of trying to sell, and that's why I am a firm believer of product-led growth, right?
Mm.
We have always had luck in selling, raising capital, right? And usually in the software industry, these kind of skill sets and these kind of patterns are given. The hustle is given way more recognition than what it ideally should be given.
Mm.
Uh, right? We have learned it the hard way. The getting your product right and a product which sells by itself is way more important than getting your hustle right, right?
Right. Yeah.
Uh, so we are fortunate to have gone through 6 years and not having died for these terrible mistakes that could have been avoided,
Right.
right? And we are a function of time. That's the best way to put it. We basically went through all the hurdles that one could face over an extended period of time to get the product right.
Right. So, did you hire a CPO or somebody? Because I think you were busy collecting these 300 customers. Did you? Who was heading building this the entire technical stack of products?
Um, we haven't. And that's the bit. So we tried in 2018. We tried bringing over people from. So there's two parts to it, right? We as a team, right? An industry like dental comes with an enormous amount of learning when it comes to developing your subject matter expertise. It's a vertical market. You got to really know about workflows. You have to know about very specific activities in the realm of revenue cycle management, insurance billing, clinical protocols.
Yeah.
It is not like really building a horizontal SaaS product. There's like subject matter expertise involved, and your product gets better based on how well you have understood these workflows and how well you have understood your users, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And so in 2018, we tried bringing on experienced engineers and professionals from non-dental background, people who have worked in enterprises, and and that whole episode was a complete failure, right?
Ah, okay.
Right. So, and the reason I say that is, people who have worked in large enterprises, if you don't have empathy seminal to the way you form your teams, in spite of having the best talent, you might actually lose out, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And it takes a tremendous amount of time to understand your users in a very, very empathetic manner, right? You could understand a lot of people rationally, but are you able to see the unseen, right? Are you able to hear the unheard, feel the unfelt as you talk to your people, to the users? That degree of understanding requires you to basically be super empathetic, right?
Right.
And if you don't get the empathy right, you don't build a great product.
Right.
and we brought on people with credentials from enterprise. None of them really fit into dental as a space, right?
Right, right.
Because it's a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of work, which is non-sexy, right? It's not a sexy business to be in. It's basically it's an operator's business, right? And
Right.
so we did. So eventually, what we recognized is, we got to make the right kind of hiring and the right kind of team building measures
Right.
based around the company that we want to build, right? So,
Right.
so we went back to our drawing board of what we want Carestack to be known for, right? So keep technology aside. When someone utters the name Carestack, we want to be known as the brand which has done more for dentists than what they have paid us for. That's the brand positioning that we need in the
Right.
market, right? Now, what does doing more mean, right? Doing more means that we do everything possible to give back more time to our end users and to our buyers. Our buyers being the dentists and the end users being the staff, right? We give them more peace of mind, and then we give them more profits and money back as a result of using Carestack, right?
So
Now,
you identified these key metrics for every stakeholder within the practice, isn't it?
that's
Set.
correct. That's correct. So if we have to do more in all these three fronts, the product obviously has to do more, and the operations that we run, whether it be data conversion, implementation, training, support, account management, revenue cycle management, all of these operations predominantly has to do more. How do these operations do more? Only by hiring people who fundamentally have the ability to give more than what they get paid for, right? So so you're really working and building a customer-centric company backwards, and you're defining what you want your brand to be known for. And that single statement really goes down to the last frontline hire you do, right?
Is it easy to find such people?
No, you have to homebrew it, right? So you basically you prioritize where you want to lay your bets on, right? What are you putting your bets on, right? Are you putting your bets on credentials, or are people who have the fundamental attributes of loyalty? Are you willing to basically spend a little bit more time doing things the right way, or are you trying to gain faster success and build an organizational atmosphere which basically can beat you down in the long run, right? So the whole leadership of team of Carestack is homegrown. It's people that have been with us from day one, right? It's people who are very, very tied to think about the customer in every aspect of their professional life, right? It's people who have the ability to zoom in and zoom out, right? People who can roll up the sleeves, go rub shoulder to shoulder with the customer, and be there with them as they need help, and then ability to come back and then think about the business from a larger perspective, right? This whole team has been homegrown, right? And for quite a bunch of time, I have had this process of justifying to investors that this is the team that's going to carry the company forward. This is the team that will take us forward. And some of these conversations has not been easy, but it again comes from the experiences of having done things which were like what you would do in a herd, right? Like going out, finding credentials, finding great resumes, putting them to work, see if money can basically bring you talent, right? And recognizing that those are all stepping stones towards failure in our environment, and then going back to the basics of really building a customer-centric company, what it requires to, and putting all bets on lifting the people who work for you, giving them more time, giving them second chances, working with them patiently, and vesting yourself in their success.
Right. No, thank you. That was quite fascinating and very, very unconventional, so to say. So when you are chasing 300 customers, were you chasing this high volume, knowing that you will lose a lot of them, or just so that you have eventually you will have a few out of them, or how was it?
No, I was, because I had not really built technology, I did not know that technology would not be built right the first time, right?
Exactly, because I would imagine you would have your first five customers and see them succeed, and then you scale. Because again,
Yeah.
when you lose like 200 customers and 30% have churned, how did your investors react to that situation?
Yeah, no, it was not pretty, right?
Mm.
It was not pretty at all. Um, so it's a chicken and egg thing, right? When you're building a vertical SaaS company, a technology company like what we are building, you have to demonstrate traction. Um, at the same time, you got to basically make sure that you're keeping your retention high and you're delivering value to the end customer, right?
Yeah.
Um, I had gotten capital allocation totally wrong when we got started, right? Uh, in 2015, I shouldn't have spent a single dollar on sales, right?
Mm.
I should have not attended a lot of conferences. I shouldn't have networked as much as I did.
Right.
All the time had to go into building a product. We shouldn't have launched in early 2017 either. We should have launched a little later than that, right? Uh, our, our- so our whole lack of experience really building a technology company and figuring out product market fit, um, that basically was a very expensive journey for us. And in terms of thinking about capital allocation itself, right?
Mm.
Um, Again, um, like I said, right, you don't do these things intentionally, right? And things happen fast, right? And
Right.
we have been a company which has been given second chance by investors, by employees, uh, by customers, and I go back to intent every time, right?
Right. Right.
What's the intent here, right?
Right.
And if your intent is right, I think people will pardon your mistakes, right? It goes true of employees too. The way we built technology in 2015, 16, and 17, those 3 years, um, are things that nobody should basically follow in the course of building technology, right?
Mm. Right.
It was a totally unreasonable, impatient way towards building technology, right?
Got it.
Now, after having gone through the journey, I understand that technology building is probably the most democratic process in the universe, right?
Right.
Everybody has to subscribe to these values of how you build it, right? Otherwise, things don't come and add up in the end.
Got it.
Uh, so the first 3 years of our journey is all about things that you should never do, and is all about how we successfully recovered from it. And the second leg of our journey is basically our second chance, right?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
So let's forward it a bit. What were the other important milestones after the first 3 years, like that you would say that it would put you in growth trajectory? What are the important milestones you would say after the first 3 years?
Yeah. So after 2000 and after we got the product market fit right,
Right.
we made sure that we readjusted our commitments around growth. Right. We
Mm.
spent a lot more time basically educating investors um, around what it means to really build and scale up business in the vertical software market. Right.
Mm.
Um, so once we got the product market fit right, the very next thing that we basically wanted to do was to make sure that existing customers were kept absolutely happy, right? You
Right.
go back and make sure that you take care of your existing customers to the extent that there aren't complaints, right? So all focus went into making existing customers happy, right?
Right.
So that was the first point. Um, the second bit that we did is we decided to methodically scale the sales team. Right. What I
Mm.
mean by methodically scaling the sales team is, you know, we recognize that in a demand generation mode, running a door-to-door sales program is not really a great scalable process. Okay. in a vertical market industry like ours, and we had to basically create like a methodical customer acquisition engine comprising of two components. One is the demand generation bit, and the other one is the sales bit, right? And we put a lot of focus on translating our understanding of how you can transform a dental practice into artifacts, events, and striking right partnerships, both on the strategic front and on with local operators, and in participation with existing customers, that got a demand generation engine kicking even before you try to stabilize sales, right? So you got the branding done. We basically made sure we send customers or spread this narrative that we are a company which is focused on doing more for you than what you pay us for. Right. And then we went down to the aspect of defining what more means. We built supporting collaterals for each of those KPIs and points. We ran webinars, events. We struck partnerships with large strategic distribution companies. We brought in distribution companies as investors. Delta Dental became an investor in Carestack, the largest dental insurance company. You built all those foundational aspects of your demand generation engine for a massive go-to-market as your next leg, on top of which sales can sit and reap the benefits, right? From running around with like a chicken without its head, door to door, you took a step back and you started building thought leadership and the necessary branding required to create a critical mass of believers who would give more fuel to your sales team.
Got it.
We built a complete sales machine which operates 100% from remote. So we don't do door to door. Since last 3 years, we don't do any of that stuff. It's all remote. Then we got the sales team basically built around a process. We brought in a standard way of selling. We subscribed to a methodology called a Sandler, which basically it teaches your sales professional to have a far more prudent way of qualifying, a prudent way of getting an upfront contract with the prospect, doing some negative reverse questioning with the prospect. We trained them on a methodology and then built a sales team around that. So those are all some of the earlier investments that we made. That's the next thing that we fixed. And then on the same token, parallelly, we were basically fixing our implementation journey and our implementation process, through which we made sure that every customer who basically goes live leaves us with the highest degree of NPS, right? So we, even if it meant it takes more time to take people and onboard people, we basically spend that degree of time more, because the subsequent business model that we have in terms of starting with software, then layering over services on top of that really constitutes for your lifetime value, that your cost of onboarding is really justified if you do that well, right? So,
but for them to derive value, it would be again at least a quarter or two, no? Because there is a gestation period of implementation. Because you are again, because for them to reap the benefits of what you have implemented end to end, they have to see at least a quarter or 2 quarters where are the costs optimized and where are the operations.
It's actually 6 to 8 months before they can really optimize operations because of all the data coming and residing, right? When I say in terms of customers basically coming over to Carestack, in our first phase, when we tried to take customers in 4 weeks live, that time was not sufficient to manage the change. Okay. Ravi, are you with me?
Yes, I'm with you.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes,
that time was not. That time was not sufficient to manage the change, right? We were taking customers for 4 weeks live without really giving them enough time to soak themselves into a new system, and it was making the frontline people nervous, and they were making mistakes. But once we decided to basically reform, that time frame doubled. So from 4 weeks, we were taking customers live in 8 weeks, giving them sufficient change, making it a very methodical process. And in most cases, telling practices not to go live if their users are fully not trained or we don't feel confident that they are trained enough,
Right.
right? Um, so those kinds of things, which gives them more time, that was put in place, right? Now, for us to basically make sense of additionally spending 4 weeks because you're spending cost anyways, the business model basically supports that kind of absorption of cost because you can start with software, you can add software-enabled services on top of that, and
Right.
things like that, right?
Got it.
So yeah, so basically focus on existing customers, intense focus on demand generation and a methodical way of selling,
Right.
and a deeply empathetic way of onboarding customers and managing change. These are the things that we did right after the first, after 3 years of doing an exact opposite of these things, right?
Got it. So for a startup like yours, especially enterprise startups, when when do you how do you make a trade-off decision between growth and profitability? Is it something that you leave it to the investors to decide and you focus on
No,
growth, or because it depends upon the mentality of the founder also, isn't it? When how he wants to control growth, profit relevant growth. How did you decide on growth versus profitability?
our lifeblood is growth, right? It's just that I got the sequence wrong. You don't start to grow before you get the product market fit right. That's what I mean by wrong capital allocation. Now that we have got, so what have we done, right? We have gotten the product market fit right. We are super well capitalized as a business. We have a 5-year operating runway sitting
Right.
where we are right now, with 0 customers. Okay.
Mhm.
um, the third thing is, in our go-to-market model, right? You need like a very strong foundation,
Mhm.
right? What is that? It starts with a superior product, and that checkbox is ticked, right?
Mhm.
The second thing is you need go-to-market partners which can make your demand generation engine very, very, uh, crank, at rapid speed.
Right.
So not only did we strike more than 2 dozen partnerships, we also bought in these partners as investors. So we have Delta Dental of California, which is America's largest dental insurance company, as a strategic investor.
I see.
Right, we are a very important portfolio company for Delta.
Right.
Right, we have Darby Dental, which is the 4th largest distribution company in dental, as an investor. And both of these guys are also partners. They basically
Right.
give you the distribution bandwidth, right? So you got that go-to-market foundation surrounding your demand generation properly built in, right?
Right.
The third thing that we did is we basically made sure that you take customers with the highest degree of satisfaction live. When you take customers live, make sure that you do not compromise on the quality of the implementation one bit, right? So
Got
by
it.
doubling up our time, so we re-engineered our total go-to-market model to
Right.
basically say that we take every office live in 8 weeks. This is what the cost of acquisition would be. This is what the cost of onboarding would be,
Right.
and how it all makes sense when you can basically think of your business model, from a full stack perspective, right? So you put
Right.
those components in place.
Right.
Now is the time that we are chasing growth, right? So over the last 12 months, we have basically been putting all the dollars on growth, right?
Mhm.
So last year we grew double our revenues. This year we are going to grow 4x more compared to
So,
last
so,
year.
so when you say growth, it's a mix of both partnership and direct customers, no?
No, it's basically direct customers, right? When I say
Direct
growth,
customers. I see. Okay.
yeah. So right now we add around 50 offices, 50 customers every month, right?
Ah,
Uh,
wow.
so the flywheel is cranking, and I think we can basically have another 7 years of rock solid growth, right? So that's how I
Ah,
think
yes.
about the business. That uh, in 7 years we need to basically be at like 20,000 offices on the cloud, right?
Hmm.
2,000 offices where we can basically uh, provide services, revenue
Right.
cycle management services,
Right.
right? Uh, at least 500 offices which we have financed,
Right.
okay, and then a total of 20 million patients to whom we can sell consumer subscription products.
What do you mean by offices that you have financed?
So this year, Carestack is launching Carestack financing. So we are actually getting into operations because we have a healthy mix of practices. We are doing lending on debt and in some cases on equity. And we have brought in additional capital partners so that we can start consolidating offices, provide management services, and start capitalizing on the full value of the offices which are residual on Carestack.
Got it. So when you usually what happens is again for most CEOs, whenever they are in a business, there is always a shiny object syndrome because they see a lot of adjacent business which are worth investing or worth branching out into. Okay, how do you ensure? How do you pick those adjacent businesses within the industry, of course, and ensure that you stay focused and relevant and you're not spreading yourself thin? So I'm sure as you become an expert in an industry, ideas come from all directions to you, right? So how do you decide which ideas to pursue as an adjacent vertical for your business growth?
Yeah, see, our overarching plan is pretty defined, right? So we are not. This is not something that's evolutionary in nature. This was
Okay.
the vision for Carestack day one, right? So
Got it.
the way we thought about the business is we would build a technology platform which combines everything.
Right.
Then we get offices on the platform. Then we start providing them services for everything which is non-clinical in nature.
I
Right?
see. Got it.
So we did that. The third leg was then you pick the good ones which are on your platform and you start financing them. And you basically become a loan origination point, and you also basically manage private capital that goes into dental offices and become like a management services company on top of that, right? And your fourth point is now that you have a captive base of practices and patients, you pick all the general dentistry practices and you look at all the patients inside those practices and see how you can sell oral health subscription products to them. For example, like how you can provide patients with clear aligner services on general dentistry offices which currently don't have orthodontic capabilities, and you capitalize on the full value of the patient base inside those offices.
Awesome.
This business model is not something that is evolutionary in nature. This is the premise on which we are started.
Right.
And so methodically we are executing on the plan. This vision existed from day one.
Got it. Okay. As long as it is making sense to the vision, I think that's a good filter whether or not you invest on something, isn't it?
Yeah, no, occasionally, I get derailed too in terms of building solutions which probably might not be needed. So, but I clearly think that you need to have this ability to do experiments, right?
Got it. Yeah, because otherwise nobody would know. You have to experiment to learn by yourself, isn't it?
Yeah. So you basically you have to experiment. You cannot lose. See, if we had decided not to plunge and do a company in dental, this company wouldn't have survived. If Mark hadn't taken a bet on us, this wouldn't have happened, right? We could have very well chosen to do only a slice of the solution, right? Why
exactly. Yeah, I would have done the same.
Choose to do all in one, right? So our choices have always been very orthogonal to, in many ways, compared to how people go about doing things, right? So that gene to basically experiment in a fearless manner resides in the company. It's what keeps us going, right?
Got it.
But what we are also super cautious about is, we are not hung up on those ego, right? When you know that you're not doing the right thing, we take a decisive action, right, to stop doing it.
Right.
And it's very, very decisive. You don't twiddle around one bit, right? So you don't basically try and pull yourself into a field of reality distortion and fool yourself. You don't do that. You're brutally honest with yourself. The moment you strike that things are not working, tone down your ego, take the hit, move on, right? So that exists. That balance is what keeps us going.
Got it.
But other than those smaller things that we experiment once in a while, the vision for Carestack that we are executing as part of a plan, it's a multi-year, 15-year-old plan. We are on track with that.
So you have a 15-year-old plan, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. I have a couple of more questions to end. I'm being mindful of your time here. This is about because I've interviewed so many entrepreneurs. One of the biggest challenge is retaining people. First of all, getting the right people first, and then retaining them. Because as you grow, if you lose your right people, then you are derailed as well. So how do you ensure that you retain the right talent and they stick with you in the long run? What kind of a leader are you in that sense?
Look, I believe that I'm a big believer of human potential, right? I truly believe that human potential is limitless, right? And most people don't live up to the potential that they inherently have within them, right? This is my personal belief. So within Carestack, and okay, so let me put it two things for you. One is belief in the power of human potential, and uh, the second bit is around your culture, right? Typically in companies, you have this fixation of building great culture, right? Um, so in my thought process, I'm not fixated about building culture. I am more passionate about building communities within the company, right? So
Interesting.
and I think culture is basically a offshoot of how good a community you can build within your company, right?
Right.
How would let's say you're living in a neighborhood and you have neighbors and you have people and you want your neighborhood to basically look good, right? You will try to create a harmonious community in your neighborhood, right? And
Right.
people would be respectful to one another, and you would get a quality of life which otherwise you wouldn't, right? In a similar fashion, I think your companies are like your neighborhoods. You really need to focus on building communities within your company, and the way to do that on scale is to basically have that whole process of picking people who can basically subscribe to this process of building communities within the team, right? So instead of focusing on and instrumenting principles around building culture, the first step is to build community,
Got it.
have community effect, right? The second bit is once you put in that effort on building communities, then your people basically you've built trust in that process, right? Right, and then you need to basically give people the platform that they have all the possibility of a platform where they can become everything that they have the possibility of becoming,
Becoming, yeah.
right?
Okay.
Those are my foundational value systems, that let's focus on thinking of ourselves as a community of communities,
Right.
right? And then how do we truly provide a platform to our community where you can allow them to unleash their full potential, maximize their potential, right?
Right.
The story of Carestack is a testimony to the maximization of potential, right? None of us have built a technology company before, right?
Right.
None of us have really come from the dental industry before, right?
Right.
You're down here from the south of India,
Right.
right? And then you've really gone into a market and you put in all your strengths to work, and you've discovered new things about yourself. Our goal is to extend that same privilege to everybody who works here,
Got it.
right?
Yeah.
So those are the two core things from that standpoint, right?
Right.
And then we also when you basically work with people, just like we have as a company, we have been given second chances. It's very important to give second chances to people,
Got
right?
it.
And
Yeah.
so those are the value systems that we work off, which we have seen to work well amongst our people, right? And Ravi, this is not where we started, right? I am here at this stage after possibly having done everything right opposite of everything that I told you right now for the first few years, right? So I've seen
Yeah.
how these things don't add up. So the reformation is largely comes from the experience of having things uh, wrong the first time and then correcting it, right? So, and we have within our engineering teams in the last 3 years, we have had less than 5% attrition, maybe
Nice.
less than that.
Nice.
Uh, yeah. So
So,
so we and we pay well and we take care of people well and we stay on par with uh, industry rates. We don't do fancy stuff
right.
like you would see in a lot of startups. We don't subscribe to fancy perks,
Yeah.
benefits, etc. But um, we pay. We provide a great compensation and then we operate the company on these principles I mentioned, and we have seen it work well within staff.
Nice. Last two questions here. I was very curious to know how did Girish Mathrubuttam from Freshworks join you as an investor? How did that collaboration happen? Maybe
Yeah,
a few words there.
yeah. In 2017, Shekhar from Axel invested into Carestack, and then Girish and Shekhar are basically Shekhar is an investor in Freshworks as well, and has been one of the early believers for Girish as well, right? And so Girish keeps a tight tab on those companies that Shekhar believes in and has a few good things to say about the founding team and things like that. So Girish expressed an interest to basically be part of Carestack, um, and we took his capital. Right. Frankly, I've had no time to spend with Girish after that. He has been busy growing Freshworks, and we have been busy on our world. So I have had very little interaction with Girish, though, Ravi. I have
Got
not
it.
spent a lot. Maybe I've met him like twice.
Okay.
One in person and one as part of an event,
Got it.
and probably had less than 30-40 minutes of conversation with him as a whole.
Got it.
Our common connect has been Shekhar.
Got it. So what was the idea behind splitting development center in Kerala, and do you also have a development center in the US, or the US is all about sales?
No, the entire product is basically out of Kerala, right?
Okay,
So,
got it.
The whole idea behind really, so that whole thinking comes from Freshworks, right?
Okay, got it. Yeah,
So Girish has built a fantastic operation out of Chennai, right, where he
right,
can really compete on a global stage.
right.
And I think he loaned that bit of the thinking from Zoho,
Zoho, yes,
right?
yes. Zoho was the first poster
Yeah, yeah,
boy of that
yeah.
kind of a model. Zoho was not, in fact, in a tier one city. It was in a village, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah,
And Trivandrum is not a tier one city either. Trivandrum
yeah.
is tier two. So my foundational, point is that you can build, global companies out of India, right? I subscribe to that point 100%, right? And it offers you a great leverage in terms of how you compete, right?
Right,
Both in terms of how you can price your offerings, how you can offer better bandwidth for your service,
right,
and how you can basically de-risk the business as a whole, right?
right.
So that's one thing. But more importantly, what basically makes this very lucrative is a vertical subject matter. Companies which require vertical subject matter expertise to be translated to an offshore destination that offers better cost benefits,
Right.
offers a far deeper competitive advantage than one can imagine.
Got it.
Right? It's not like building horizontal SaaS companies So what we have done differently is in a market which has deep vertical subject matter expertise tied to it.
Got it.
Right? We have
Yeah.
managed to really get that whole subject matter expertise around dental recreated right here in the small town here in Kerala, right?
But the
Our
challenge is
folks
for the
were
CEO.
building. Come again?
The challenge is for you, right? How do you split your time between India operations and the US? Do you travel often? Of course, pre-COVID, how were you managing your time?
So I do a 50-50. So Ravi, I'm very hands-on on the front lines. I like basically getting involved on the product. I like staying in touch with customers. I like to be top down as well as bottom up uh, from the way I like to stay in touch with the business, right? So it I don't know if that's the right way to run a company, but fortunately or unfortunately, that's who I am from my work habits, right?
Right.
So, long story short is, Trivandrum for us basically is a very, very uh, critical part of the business model as a whole,
Right.
right? And the fortunate thing is Kerala and Trivandrum have traditionally it's probably the most literate state in the whole of India, right?
Yes.
And people have a decent degree of background in health, education, and financial services. There are enterprise software companies out of Trivandrum in these three verticals, so the domain is not really a new one, right?
Got it.
The nuances are there, and you got to
Right.
basically go down to the nitty gritties, but it's not domain wise. You have availability of people, right? But over the last 6 years, now our folks here understand dental. We are like 400 people strong in Toronto,
Got it.
okay?
Got it. Yeah.
And people
And
who
you.
run operations on behalf of dental offices, right? Where we run revenue cycle management. The guys here understand clinical. They understand patient relationship management workflows.
Right.
Building that moat of 6 years, that's kind of what I believe is the propelling force forward, right? It allows us to roll a new solution out quickly. It allows us to basically spawn teams quickly, absorb more people quickly, price offerings competently. So the bet on Trivandrum has basically proved to be in the right direction.
Awesome. Amazing. My last question here is, what would be your advice for aspiring entrepreneurs? I mean, the interview itself today was thought provoking to many and inspirational to many. But what would be your few key advice? Because you are non-conventional in many ways. I would not know if it would pass on as advice. Your story itself is an advice in many ways. But if you were to dish out advice to entrepreneurs who want to begin their own businesses, enterprise businesses, what would be your advice there?
Look, I think I don't know if I'm worthy of giving advice to people, but uh, but I'd like to say a few things in that direction, though, right? Um, Building a startup is not really meant for everyone, right? And quite often, passion alone might not carry you forward,
Hmm.
right? Um, you might actually, you should actually be good at some things, right? In order for you to carry this forward, and your skill and your commitment uh, are probably more important than the passion you bring to the table.
Hmm.
In many ways, for this to basically run for a long time, and therefore, uh, you know, and you're basically running a race in forward motion, right? So things keep happening to you. Um, so there's also a good chance that uh, you might not really end up getting to the finish line and lose a lot of time in that process, right?
Hmm.
So as much as you're passionate, think twice before you start up, because truly the whole process of starting up is not really meant for normal people. It's basically a path for really abnormal people to do it, right? So you need to you need to have a behavioral disorder to really to do this, right? And to put yourself through pain and on a path of endurance and pain, right? Startups are built and your businesses are built in the confluence of how you can think about your levels of ambition, your endurance, and your learnability. And if you have a large portion of all these three things over time, you build a large business, right?
Right.
Um, so think 10 times before you start up, right? It's not meant for everybody. It's a function of your behavioral disorder. uh, the second thing is basically to also uh, develop some sense of direction. So while you don't want to basically begin and run a startup with milestones, a sense of direction is hugely important, and your ability to do some introspection and retrospection and calibration of your path on a near constant basis as to where you are originally from what you originally thought out to be, right? A pure sense of direction and a frequent calibration that that you can be thoughtful about, right? Um, and then third thing is be willing to experiment, um, and it's okay that even if you get beaten down, so be willing to experiment and be decisive, right? Don't hold on to things if you see it's not working. Just make quick, fast decisions. Be decisive, and overall, just be grateful to life around you, and develop a better appreciation for life and people in general, so that you can continue to be rooted and the journey is, it's almost like a marathon that you have to run at the speed of a sprint, and therefore you need to derive a constant sources of energy to replenish you, right? And that only happens the more grounded you are. Your chances of having more such energy sources happens, right? So be be grateful, um, and things will basically take care from there.
Got it. And industry. So you as a CEO, as a founder, you had strong domain and industry expertise, right? Would that also be one of the important aspects before you jump into a business, or you
No,
can learn it along the way?
no, I don't think that's required. Look, see, I think I had the foundational attributes for being empathetic to people, so I could really see. I think that's the quotient. That's the quotient that basically makes the difference, right? The degree of empathy that you share, that allows you to understand a domain faster, right? That allows you to understand the buyers faster, the users faster, right?
Yeah.
And quite often it's not a function of time, right? Because um, things are basically hidden in unseen, unheard, and unfelt things, right? Details are quite often hidden in when it comes down to the last mile, and when it comes down to details and users and creation of technology and software. Empathy, which is your ability to see the unseen and hear the unheard and feel the unfelt, that's what really becomes like the differentiating factor. It's not your years spent in an industry, it's your degree of empathy that you share for the time that you have been in an industry.
Right. And when should one take a plunge? I mean, usually, you were quite young, so you had fewer risks and fewer responsibilities to take up. You were coming from a business background as well. Does one also needs to be, say, say if somebody is in his late 30s or early 40s, is there a preferred age when one should take risk, or what are your ideas around that?
Ravi, I think it's like I said right before. This is meant for people with severe behavior disorders.
Sort of. That's a nice one.
It
Yeah.
is it is not a function of age. It is not a function of any. It's how wacky you are, right?
Yeah.
And I say this because in 2019 I went into a coma, right?
Oh
So
yes, you
I've
mentioned.
had two near-death experiences running Carestack, right? Um, right. So for a lot of people, post some things like this, it's time to basically tone down and think about life differently, right? I have actually gone the other way around. Now that I have, there's no novelty to a coma anymore. So it's you've uncovered that. So it's your so startups are not really meant for normal people, right? That's the criteria here,
Right.
right? And
So
this is a 0 or 1 game, right? There's nothing in between. It's zero
so
or
so
one
the
game. Nobody owes you an answer. The markets don't need to recognize if you're 40, or markets don't need to recognize if you're not paid yourself for the last 10 months. None of that should matters to the market, right? So one should take the call knowing all of those things, right? Yeah.
Got it. So that means none of these rules matter. There are no rules.
No,
You-
you know, let me sum it up this way, right? Um, if you decide to start up, right, only two things matter, right? Uh, can you do it, and then the second one is, can you get away with it? And everything in between is negotiable, right?
Yeah.
So that's the best way to put it.
Excellent. Well, this brings us to an end of a fascinating conversation with Abhi. I was just engrossed because it just got better and better as we unraveled the inside stories, and I always relish those conversations where it's no holds barred, and not all CEOs actually share so much details. But Abhi was quite open about all his entire journey. So thanks, Abhi, for sharing, and I am sure everybody who is listening, who will listen to this episode, is going to go back with a lot of insights and learnings. Thanks again, Abhi.
Ravi, thanks for having me to your show, and all the best to you, and thanks very much.
And all the best for the future of Carestack as well. I think now the ball is set to grow, and it's only
Yeah,
going to compound from here. See you
yeah.
then. Bye bye.
Thanks, Ravi. Bye.